Have you ever met someone whose English isn't technically that great, but they are just fantastic communicators? And then you meet someone else, their grammar is nearly perfect, but they can barely get a point across. It's a really interesting puzzle, and it's one that communication expert Mariana Pascal spent 20 years trying to solve. And you know what? The answer she found is surprisingly simple. So let's dive in.
So let's just start with that big question. What really makes someone good at communicating in a language that isn't their own? We're always told it's about having a huge vocabulary or flawless grammar, but what if that's not it at all? What if it's something totally different?
And boom, here it is. This is the big reveal. Right up front, after working with thousands of speakers, Pascal realized it has very little to do with how good your English is. Nope. It has a whole lot to do with your attitude. And that single idea is what we're going to unpack today. Okay, so if it's all about attitude, what does that actually look like in the real world? Well, let me introduce you to someone who is the perfect example of this idea in action. He's a guy who proves that proficiency really isn't the most important thing. This is Faisal. He's a factory supervisor. And his English level is, let's just say, pretty low. And yet, he can sit down with literally anyone, a CEO from another country, a brand new hire on the factory floor, and just communicate. He listens, he understands, he expresses himself. He never gets nervous or stumbles over his words. He just connects. So what on earth is his secret? Faisal's secret is all about his mindset. And to really get it, we need a killer metaphor that shows two totally different ways of approaching a new skill. So forget about language for a minute and just think about this. A piano versus a video game. All right, first up, we have the piano player. I want you to picture a little kid who's being forced to take piano lessons. They kind of hate it, right? They are terrified of hitting a wrong note. Why? Because their teacher, their parents, and even they themselves believe that a good performance means making the fewest mistakes. All their focus is on themselves and this intense fear of being judged for every little imperfection. Okay, now picture this. A teenager in an internet cafe playing some kind of shooting game. He might be awful at it. But does he care? Not at all. He's not embarrassed. He's not afraid of his friends looking over his shoulder and judging him. His entire focus is glued to that screen on one thing and one thing only, the goal, defeat the bad guys. And you know what? He's having a ton of fun doing it. So here it is, side by side. This is the absolute key. The piano player is focused on themselves. They feel judged, and they're obsessed with being perfect, which just leads to anxiety and not being very effective. But the video game player, they're focused on the goal, they feel zero shame, and they just want to get a result, which leads to effectiveness and, hey, even a little fun. That is Faisal's secret. He's not performing English, he's playing the communication game. Okay, so we have these two mindsets, right? The nervous piano player and the focused video game player. Now, let's put them to the test in a real-life situation that shows the difference perfectly. We're going to a pharmacy. So here's the scene. A customer walks in. She needs to buy an omega supplement. She gets to the aisle, and she's just staring at the shelf, totally confused. Some bottles say DHA, others say EPA. She has no idea what the difference is. All she needs is a little bit of clear advice to figure out which one to buy. Simple enough, right? So the first pharmacy assistant comes over. Her English level is actually really high. But the second she sees a native English speaker, she panics. She starts talking a mile a minute, listing off all these technical terms, docosahexaenoic acid and icosapentaenoic acid, just going in circles. Her focus is on sounding smart, on performing her English perfectly. And the result? The customer is more confused than ever. Problem not solved. So the customer turns to another assistant. This woman's English is very, very basic. But she's not scared. She doesn't see a judge who's going to grade her English. She just sees a person who has a problem that needs solving. Her focus shifts completely away from herself and onto the customer's goal. And this is where it gets absolutely brilliant. The second assistant just looks the customer right in the eye and asks two super simple questions. Heart okay? The customer says, yeah, my heart's fine. Then she asks, brain okay? And the customer admits, her memory isn't what it used to be. The assistant smiles, points to one bottle and says, okay, you take omega DHA. Boom, problem solved. That is video game communication. Now, this isn't just a cute story about a pharmacy. This mental shift from I have to be perfect to I need to get a result is becoming maybe the most important skill in global communication today. And to really get why, we need to look at who is actually speaking English in the world. And let me tell you, the answer is probably going to surprise you. All right, take a look at this. It's pretty wild.
If you could listen in to every single English conversation happening around the world right now, what percentage do you think would have a native speaker in it? The answer is just 4%, a tiny 4%, which means a mind-blowing 96% of all English conversations today are between non-native speakers. Just think about what that statistic really means. It's huge. English is no longer this precious art form that belongs to native speakers, something you have to master like a classical piano. It has become a practical global tool that belongs to everybody, and its only purpose is to get a result. Here's a hilarious real-world example of this. So there's a barbecue with a bunch of international engineers. A French engineer tries to tell a Korean engineer that the hot dog has cheese inside. He says, "The hot dog has cheese inside." The Korean engineer is just confused. So the Frenchman tries again. "The cheese comes from the hot dog." Still nothing. But then a Japanese engineer who was listening in has this light bulb moment, and he clarifies for everyone, "Ah, cheese is imported." And just like that, everybody gets it. The English was totally broken, but the result was perfect understanding. So, if this is the reality of global English, why do so many of us still have that piano player mindset? Well, the problem usually starts in school. We're taught English like it's an art that has to be perfected. You get a big red X for a tiny grammar mistake, even if your message was perfectly clear. We're graded on perfection, not on communication. The thing is, this whole school mindset has real negative effects that hold so many of us back. But the good news is, you can unlearn it. There is a very clear, simple way to break free and unlock that confident, effective voice that you actually already have inside you. When you're stuck in that self-conscious piano player mode, your brain kind of freezes up. First, you stop actually listening to the other person because you're too busy in your own head thinking about what you're going to say next. Second, the words that you totally know just seem to vanish. And third, you lose your confidence because you mistake that temporary brain freeze for a real lack of ability. Okay, so here is the solution. And it is so simple. It is a conscious shift in your mindset. The next time you're speaking English, I want you to make a deliberate choice. Stop focusing on yourself. Stop worrying about your mistakes. Instead, put 100% of your focus on the other person and on the result you're trying to achieve with them. And that's really the big takeaway here. English isn't some sacred thing you have to be afraid of. It's just a tool. It's like a hammer or a screwdriver. It's there to help you build things, connect with people, and get a job done. And that tool, it belongs to you. It is not about taking years of new classes or memorizing a dictionary. It's about one simple, powerful change in where you put your attention, from yourself to the other person, from trying to be perfect to trying to get a result. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Now that you know the secret isn't about perfecting a performance, but about using a tool to get something done, what results are you going to go out and achieve?